It's happy times and places, if happy is what you used to describe things that are scary and dark and tense, have lots of death, people being killed horribly. It's Doctor Who, of course, narrated over by me, Toby Hadoke, who's got a guest to choose a Doctor Who story and their favourite things about it. I have to guess what they are.
Hello, Toby Hadoke. My name's Chris Chapman, and I make documentaries for the Doctor Who range for the Blu-ray collections at the moment and the DVDs before that. I'm recording for you some things about a Doctor Who story called The Seeds of Doom.
Well, welcome back, everybody, to Happy Times and Places and The Seeds of Doom. I've had a little bit of a sabbatical between episodes 3 and 4, where I've been segregated to a different wing of the house. My food has been left outside on trays, and my body has been sort of shielded from everybody else's lest I cause infection. Because they come in pairs, don't they? The lines that indicate whether you have COVID or not. And I contracted, having been so careful for 2.5 years. I contracted COVID and so couldn't do any recording or podcasting or any of that. But I'm back now. I tested negative today, so I've had, as I say, a bit of time off, whilst my body underwent a transformation. What could possibly go wrong? So before I turn into the size of St Paul's Cathedral and sit atop the roof, let's watch the rest of this story that I am enjoying very much, that has been set for me as a task by Chris Chapman, producer of a great number of fantastic Doctor Who DVD and Blu-ray special features. In fact, we were discussing one today on WhatsApp, where he was sent a list of contributors he's got together for a particular documentary. I'm not going to be on this one, but he's just saying, was there anybody we've forgotten? And, here's the list. And my goodness, what a fantastic lineup of people. And I think he's going to do a really good job, and people will love what he's come up with. So he continues to do the Time Lord's work for forthcoming DVDs and Blu-rays. I'll start calling the Blu-rays, and then there'll be mind injections. That's my prediction for the next form of home entertainment. The Doctor Who season 8 mind injection set. Anyway, let us choose to resume The Seeds of Doom from episode 4. Let's see what happens when the Krynoid touches human flesh. Well, here we are. So this was on my second Scotch tape. Oh, they were the black colour scheme that they had as well just made them seem very classy. But it always niggled that I had a Tom Baker sandwiched between two John Pertwees. This was where Frontier in Space should have been, but Colin, who did me my bootlegs, just did what came to hand. Anyway. I like his leather gloves. Do you think Harrison Chase wears leather gloves as an additional piece of sort of plant/vegetable based ideological sort of an ideological display, a sartorial comment. I love this. I actually like. I mean, I think of the Doctor as being, this peaceful kind of person. But Tom Baker is so good at this sort of down and dirty. He doesn't make a meal of it. Jumps through the lantern window, smashes Boise from Only Fools and Horses over the head with a stool, and picks up a gun. That's a brilliant effect of the Krynoid pod opening and grabbing Keeler. It's very, very well done. I like the way that Chase slides across the floor slightly. Harry Fielder, a legend. There he is, bless him. Gets a credit on this episode. He is in other episodes, but he speaks on this one. I've got a feeling. I think David Masterman was supposed to be in the interior sections and then wasn't. The guard leader guy. He's only on the location stuff. And so maybe because Harry was around, they gave him some lines. That's in the back of my head somewhere. There's excellent makeup there, and I love the way he takes the jacket off. You can, you can feel the sort of the pain on and as somebody who's had terribly painful skin when my psoriasis has been at its worst, you do, and I have taken clothes off like that, the way that you sort of peel it off slightly so as not to do any sort of rubbing. It's a very well observed piece of jacket removal. It's a really good piece of makeup, and I love Harrison Chase's response, going, oh, this is unique, and he sort of starts looking after him sort of quite gently, like he's a specimen. My friend John Deere, who does an excellent podcast on Quatermass and Nigel Neal and other things, sent a message saying, what? Oh, I love the way he goes, Mr. Keeler. I love a butler. It's that mixture of kind of alarm and slight effrontery. And that's the beauty of Doctor Who, is you can sort of throw a butler into this situation and he's going to respond like a butler. Gorgeous. John said that the reason I failed to articulate, just as I failed to articulate earlier on about the leather gloves being a sartorial display of kinship with with the plant kingdom by having slain animals on his mitts. Nobody move. Tom Baker is at the height of his powers in this. John suggested that the reason Harrison Chase works is because he's a very adult. It's an adult performance, and he comes with him from a series of sort of quite tough guy, adult, gritty thriller movies, and he's got all of that sort of stuff to back him up. And yet he is camp. But I think John's right. It's a kind of it's a campery that's from a sort of slightly hardened gangster kind of background and genre, not the sort of campery you might see elsewhere in Doctor Who. I love this exchange. I was sad to read in the discontinuity guide, I think, that's not a quote and that's a load of old nonsense. But that exchange, it doesn't matter. I'm sold on it, the money of the same religion. I'll come back with a rejoinder. The banter is bantery, but it never undermines the seriousness of the situation. John Challis doesn't rise to the Doctor's bait, and it's a very good choice that John Challis makes as an actor, because I know John Challis considered himself a bit of a sort of light comedian type, and indeed his subsequent performance in Only Fools and Horses. But he was I think he considered himself a bit of a turn, but his looks led to him playing these sorts of characters. But we've seen in the history of Doctor Who actors trying to rise to the challenge of Tom Baker, where Tom Baker gets obtuse and silly and they think, oh, I can match him with this. I think Challis makes exactly the right decision to actually go, no. I'm gonna let him have his head, and I'm gonna let him do this stuff and not play him at that game, and in fact, maintain the real steel and that stuff of chucking him against the bins and grabbing him by the head. I mean, it's terrible. I love Doctor Who as a sort of fantastical, charming, often daft show, but I do love it when it gets a bit down and dirty and grown up. I mean, as I say, as grown up, look at that. He's pulling his hair, and the darkness, the shadow that Camfield's got in the lighting here, the absolute sort of sweaty intensity that Tom Baker's giving it, the fact that John Challis doesn't pull his punches, and he's got a sort of submachine gunny thing. This is the sort of thing that plays to the teenage boy still within me, who wanted Doctor Who to be terribly serious and grown up. And I think I admire it because it's it's done so well. It's really skillfully done. Everybody's playing it very, very well. Everyone's playing it very seriously. And I like Doctor Who when it's Carnival of Monsters. I like Doctor Who when it's daft and plays upon the imagination and has the guts to sort of, tempt us right to the brink of what is believable, because, it is at its core a very, very silly show. But I also like it when everybody goes, no, we're going to make something as tough and uncompromising as we can within the limitations of Saturday tea time drama. I admire that. I admire the sort of attempt to go, well, we can make this as hard edged as possible, so that when you're a kid watching it, and you get drive-by cutting replies from any adults in the room who want to shame you or make you feel ridiculous for liking your thing, when actually they didn't have much of a leg to stand on. Although, of course, to most casual viewers, this and Mordrin Undead and the Twin Dilemma probably don't actually look that much different from each other, because to the bigoted Notwheel, Doctor Who looks the same. Tony Beckley's superb. He's beautifully intense there, but without mad-eyed, without rolling his eyes and going crazy. There's a real sort of intensity to him, and mixed with a sort of scientific curiosity, and a strange sort of detachment that he has, and actually quite brutal in a way as well. And this is a nice note, because you think, well, hang on, what's Hargreaves, is a real person. Come on. So he does his bit there where he goes, well, I'll just bring this up. But as we know about the British establishment, for all we dress it in its finery, if the money's right, we don't ask any questions. It doesn't ask any questions, and we'll sell anything down the river. John Challis is excellent. I wonder if I'm going to get a chance to choose John Challis. I think I just take for granted that he's so good, because having read the book, he was exactly how I imagined the character to look and be played, and he didn't disappoint. But because he perhaps didn't surprise me. And then, of course, you take it for granted because he's Boise in Only Fools and Horses, so he's a bit of a recognisable national institution face. But he's so good. If you didn't know any of that, you'd just go, this guy is just amazing. Now, this was a real surprise for me, because in the book, Amelia Ducat has fulfilled her function to the story. And Philip Hinchcliffe, who when I read the book I hadn't realised had been the producer of Doctor Who, because it was a very early book for me to read, and I loved the cover with the... He does have a catchphrase, "Why am I surrounded by idiots?" Again, in lesser hands, I might find that a bit annoying. I like this sort of slightly catty, well, I can do what I want. It might and it might not. I like that. It's slightly sort of catty and defensive, but utterly believable. Did I say that Tony Beckley was great friends with Sheila Hancock? And I may have done in a previous one. And Matthew Sweet and a few fans led a pilgrimage to his grave in Los Angeles when they were last at Gallifrey. It would have been nice to have been there. But what a lovely thing to do. But I'm sure Sheila Hancock, in her book The Two of Us, that's written about her and John Thor, suggests that Tony Beckley's cancer was, perhaps an early manifestation of what was, that cancer that blighted the gay acting community in the States before it was fully understood what it was. I don't want to put words into her mouth, but I'm sure that was her inference in that book. And he did die terribly young. Mark Jones, excellent. It's such a shame he was poorly when they were doing the DVD. I'd have loved to have got hear him talk about this performance here. I hope he knew just how good he was. A friend of mine did write to him many, many years ago, and because my friend did, I never did. Because I thought, well, my friend does. I wish I had now, and got a nice letter back. And he's so good in this, and of course Sarah wants to help, and of course he's been vulnerable, and he's been but here he's quite right in what he's saying. He's getting desperate. So that's good characterization in a way, because a lesser writer would make him continue to be the vulnerable, sort of weaker character, but he's desperate, and that's really horrible. The plate of meat, which was the advert break on the Super Channel version I had of this, but it was well edited, so I just got the break into the adverts. Then it came back again, but it still annoyed me because it covers some of the drama. Hello. Well, I had a little bit of a break there myself. As you heard, my other half came in with a rattly wheelchair wheel. But yes, as I say, I'm sort of slightly used to this episode being interrupted at this point. Although, as I say, I think I was fortunate that none of these episodes had the advert break within them, which would have been just awful. All the things that used to be so. But then I'd have the dilemma of going, well, I could copy them over myself onto a different tape and edit out the adverts, but then I'd lose a generation, and I wasn't sure my cables were as good to copy things as well as, because I actually had all this stuff in fairly reasonable quality. Anyway, this is the trials and tribulations. I wonder what this is like for younger listeners. I don't know if there are younger listeners, but that they're sort of piecing together and getting your episodes from different sources. But I'm lucky that I always saw this in good quality. I love Sylvia Coleridge. I love all that stuff about, £1,000 done and all of that sort of thing. And that's a lovely line that he has about the Wars of the Roses being charmingly named, but rather bloodthirsty. It's, as the book shows, none of this is particularly essential, but it's lovely colour. I can see why those who say this is very Avengers-esque might cite the daft old lady with her woolen mittens, the eccentric old lady and the villain obsessed, multimillionaire obsessed with plants as very sort of Avengers-y dynamic. I can kind of buy that, but it's, as I say, it's a sort of love child of the Avengers and the Sweeney living in Doctor Who's house. And of course it's night time now, so we've got that beautiful glow from the fire, which is lighting. We've got the beautiful shadow from the darkness, which is lighting. So the lighting in this story is absolutely superb. I mean, that could be a thing. I'm so always drawn to the actors. I could pick any. Oh, and look, and Elizabeth Sladen is great. I actually think I don't mention her enough. She was the screamer to my elder siblings. Oh, we don't like Sarah. She screamed all the time. So I was shocked when I sort of started seeing her in action and going, no, she's brilliant. She's so good. I love this. The way that, and I remember in the book, I'd imagined this gobbling up machine, the compost machine, which is sort of like a bathtub with some serious teeth. I imagined it much more like a conveyor belt. I imagine this giant long room with sort of, stuff that you threw on it. But then I wondered, well, why couldn't people just roll off? I'd not imagined the sort of high sides. So this was a bit of a slight change from what I'd imagined, but it made perfect sense to me. Of course, it had to have high sides. I knew that my imagined image was not going to be the correct one. But it's nicely done, dear Arnold. I love that. And this is properly horrifying, properly nurtured, and the Doctor's reaction, that whispered sort of and the kind of Tom Baker has a great line in sort of resonant disgust, the deep sort of baritone a distaste at bad things. And a word for Jeffrey Bergen as well, whose music is so interesting and gives a different timbre to... It's famously, I think, isn't it? Because Dudley Simpson, who did loads of the music for Doctor Who and for Blake Seven, Douglas Camfield, I think, went to his house. I was invited to a party and went, "You've got a really nice house. I think you earn too much money." And so didn't hire Simpson for Jewel, his episode of Blake Seven, or for his Doctor Who's. Now, I've seen that sort of spun off into Douglas Camfield hated Dudley Simpson. I don't know if that was the case. People do like it quite often happens when you sort of read something where somebody's made a sort of comment in an interview and that gets spun off 20 years later into this person despised everything this person stood for, and you go, might not be quite as sort of hate-filled as that. The sort of the polls that people like sort of interpersonal and professional relationships. I've been reading Doctor Who Twitter today, and my gosh, it's like being back in the school playground sometimes. Anyway, this is all about accentuating the love, and I love Dudley Simpson's music, but I love Jeffrey Bergen's as well, and I was very pleased to go and see the Scottish play at the Royal Shakespeare Company when Bergen was doing the music for that. He did quite a lot of music for the stage and film. Your death will be agonising, perversively quick. And he doesn't say, what can I say? And I'm always drawn to this, the stuff about blood and bone, and the way that it's described, in all this sort of organic way. I have a compost heap, and I always sort of feel and pumped into the garden, nature's grand design. I do always like it when I feel I've recycled vegetable matter and leftover food, and it's going to actually have some good from the fact that I'm not eating those cauliflower leaves, which are actually perfectly edible and perfectly nice, but we're like certain fish that we decide we're not going to take from the sea, even though they're perfectly edible. There's certain things that we eat and certain things that we don't, and I don't think it's always to do with taste. Anyway, I love Tom Baker's. I still can't think of anything to say. But it never quite sends up the drama, because there's an undercurrent of believability about the whole thing. So you can get the funny lines, and they still work. And I remember watching this stuff with Amelia Ducar and going, okay, so she's tied with them, and that's how it brings Dunbar back into this. And I'm sure, I think in the book, Dunbar just sort of goes, well, I better go and sort this out. But it just means we get a lovely couple of scenes here, and some in the next episode, of the glorious Sylvia Coleridge, who's also in the Gambit episode of Blake Seven. She gives good colour, and I love Dunbar. Kenneth Gilbert, I've made a terrible mistake, Sir Colin. He's doing the absolute, underplayed dramatic stuff. And Keeler's turned into an axon. I remember being thrilled, I think, when I made the connection that, that's, because I love the claw. Oh, yes, because I had this on the same tape as the Claws of Axos. So I love the fact that I'd got the monster on sharing the same VHS cassette. But it's great use of an old costume. I love the Axon costumes, and they work well orange, but it works perfectly well green. And that wonderful sound effect that they have, that sort of rattling, planty breathing. Plants breathe. Yeah, plants can breathe. That's what I imagine a plant breathes like a sort of inarticulate, asthmatic sea devil with that sort of rattle. It would have been such a waste. He's great, and he sort of the way he touches his mouth, and he's quite spitty there, wasn't he? There's something quite again, quite dirty and viscous about the Doctor, and this is a lovely face-off. It's nice when a sort of supporting character has their moment. He's and I think Kenneth Gilbert deserves credit because he's never played Dunbar as sort of snivelling and grasping, although he is quite grasping. He plays him as somebody that thinks he's a decent man of principle, and I think that really works. And it really pays off well here, where he gets his heroic moment. I love this bit. You won't get past the guards, and he draws the gun. I'm going to be the heroic guy. And then I get Dunbar. I have that if my friend Peter texts me, a lovely chap who I know online, and I've met, has come to see my shows, Paul, knew that I liked that line, so did it for me. I wouldn't know how to do it as a ringtone. So when my friend, I couldn't have it for all my ringtones because I didn't want to get tired of it. So, but when I get a text from my friend Peter, it says, Scooby, get Dunbar. And this is dark. Look at this. This is dark and wonderful. And I think the publicity shots, didn't they have the Doctor and Sarah with the sword? And that's an image that's on the cover of the book. But that was one of the sort of photos doing the rounds as well. So this feels like the story sort of coming together with all its iconography. This is the Krynoid that one knows from the book. Although, we know it gets bigger than this, but this is the shape, this is the silhouette. I always used to worry about that Venetian blind effect from the firing gun, and used to think, why does that have to happen? But this is beautifully dark and nighttime, and the Doctor's got the sword, and Sarah's bravely picked up a stick. And this is a horrible death, which is all done from the sort of acting and what you don't see, great close-up, and it's a shame because Dunbar's a good character, so the stakes are up, and that's quite the way that the Krynoid rises into shot to suggest that it's been eating him or something. And it looks all right for now. It's only, and he gets the sword out. It's only that shot. It's only that shot where it wobbles towards the camera, and you can see the costume slightly kink. That is only there. It's one of the few tiny moments that doesn't quite work, and that's a shame because I think actually up to that sequence has been absolutely spot on. So we've said goodbye to Keeler and to Dunbar in this episode. I love that episode. I'm pretty sure that episode would be an episode I would choose if I was to have. I sometimes used to fantasize about doing a sort of a studio lighting John Dixon. Well done, John Dixon. Doing a sort of what would I do if I did an episode per Doctor, if I were to do if I were to have special invited guests to a Doctor Who extravaganza. I think I'd choose episode 4 of the Seeds of Doom as the Tom Baker example. I think it's such a good episode. I love that episode. I love the way it builds to a climax. There's so much about it that works and is strong. Even the stuff you don't need is cherishable. All that dialogue that Emilia Ducat has is glorious. And did I mention that I have common snake's head flatillaries in this garden? I have a garden. I've latterly got quite into gardening. I used to have to help my mum out in the garden and hated it. But actually, as I've got older and I see the need for a bit of physical exercise and the sun's rays and spending some time outside and not being all locked in, I've got an exterior green cathedral, and I bought a load of common snake's head fritillaries that were on sale because it was the end of season at B&Q, and plonked them in, and they did okay. So then I got a load of bulbs and popped them all over the place. So actually, early in because they don't flower in the summer, they're sort of spring. So along with the daffodils, I have a fair few common snake's head fritillaries, and I got them because they're mentioned in Doctor Who, but I do actually like them, and Shirley knows that they are there because they're mentioned in Doctor Who, and she doesn't mind too much, but they are beautiful flowers. But yeah, it is because they're from Doctor Who. I also have Spectrox nest and or any other plants, and some cocoa plant. I'm just trying to think of other plants mentioned in Doctor Who. Right. I love that. I love that episode. I love so much about that episode. But do you know what? I cannot. There's no logic to this. It won't be Chris's thing. There are any number of performances that deserve attention. I think Kenneth Gilbert. I mean, I keep going back to John Challis as well. He's so good. And Tony Beckley. I mean, it's an embarrassment of riches. But Tony Beckley has a lot to work with. John Challis has a lot to work with. Kenneth Gilbert, could be one in any a number of any number of sort of support. And I remember in the book, he's not a particularly memorable character, and you kind of know where's going with him, and you're not that bothered about him. He makes an instant impression as Dunbar early on. And I think he keeps on delivering, and I think it's a wonderful performance. He was mates with Brian Miller, Liz Sladen's husband, actually, and Brian told me that he was very poorly towards the end of his life. He had cancer and was in a lot of pain. So I never had the pleasure, but I think he gives a lovely performance. I think he's got lovely diction. It's a great performance, but I'm not going to choose a performance, even though I keep saying, Hubert Rees in the first couple of episodes, well, I love him too. Beautiful. Sylvia Coleridge. In any other story you'd go, I've got to choose the dotty old woman. I am choosing, you won't get past the guards, we'll see, Scooby, get Dunbar. Why? I don't know. I just love it. It makes no sense, the fact that the door is open to the drawing room and Chase just shouts. You would have an intercom system or something in which to sort of call Scooby and say, Scooby, Dunbar's in the grounds, you need to stop him escaping or whatever. No, it just works so much better, although less logically, for him to yell at the door, Scooby, get Dunbar. And I absolutely love it. I nearly swore then. I love it to flipping pieces. And there are probably better bits in the episode. There are probably better bits in the whole story. I don't care. I love it. I love that whole scene and the way that it builds up. And actually, I love what comes after it as well, because then you have the running about in the darkness and the grabbing of the sword. And as I say, that's when all one's sort of, the images buried in one's subconscious from childhood about the story all sort of suddenly start to come together. And it feels like the whole thing's suddenly taking on even more epic qualities, even though we've already been to, the Antarctic and had one thing open up and explosions and all that already. Oh, I love this. It's such a good Doctor Who story. But I am going for Scooby Get Dunbar. What is Chris choosing for episode 4?
Episode 4. So this for me, although there's some really good body horror in episode 1 in particular, as the pod's effects are starting to show. In episode 4, I think you get the most disturbing body horror. And that's the thing that I will say is my favourite thing about it, because obviously there's a cliffhanger at the end of episode 3 where it looks like Sarah's going to be touched by the tentacly bit of the pod. And instead it goes for Keeler, Arnold Keeler. And the story's done very well of establishing Keeler as, he's fallen in with the wrong crowd. He's obviously presumably doing it for the money. So he's not a very nice person, but he's got a bit of a conscience, and he sees Scooby doing horrible things. And he wouldn't, why would Scooby do this? And you feel like this is a man way out of his depth who would probably like to turn over a new leaf. When this story is over. And episode 4 is really a tragic arc for, the most tragic arc for Keeler, because he gets stung by the pod and infected by the Krynoid at the start of the episode. And then you see slowly over the course of the episode him become a Krynoid, and the episode ends with he's turned into a big wobbly Christmas tree Krynoid, and comes to get the goodies. But it's a really lovely transition, and has this kind of very black comedy edge to it, because Chase, on Keeler getting stung, Chase is immediately like, Keeler, my best friend, I must look after you. You don't need hospital. We'll look after you here. And Keeler's obviously very suspicious of why Mr. Chase is suddenly so protective of him. So I love the idea that they just put him into a room upstairs in a little English cottage and start feeding him red meat start feeding him raw meat, I think, and looking after him. And there's a really, heartbreaking scene when Sarah discovers him, and it's a really lovely performance as well, as he kind of pleads with her. And it's horrible. You really get a sense of a man losing his humanity. And I think it's better done here than it is, say, in terms of Noah becoming a Wirren in the Ark in Space. I mean, I think it's more sympathetic and it's more gradual. And this sense of people being nice to him and looking after him in order for him to become something horrible is lovely. I love that. So it's horrid, and I think the makeup's really good. I think it really, the fact that those scenes with him in the cottage are mostly in shadow, and that it's played so straight. So I would say Keeler performance and arc in episode 4. Keeler's turn is my choice. Oh, yeah, episode 4, yeah, as well.
That's good. I mean, I had Keeler a couple of episodes ago. Oh, was that just a piece of gossip? But I think under different circumstances, and even though Chris cited the performance there, I don't think I can claim that because, Chris was specific to this episode because of the body horror element, which is quite right, an excellent thing to choose. It is an element that does have echoes to Ark in Space for a number of reasons. Because the headline news of this episode, of course, is that this is one of the 2 episodes that Philip Hinchcliffe cut on the grounds of taste. So Keeler's transformation, I'm assuming it was probably, in fact, yeah, it was. It was partially to do with the strength of Mark Jones's performance. That the transformation, I think he screamed, and I think he was in such agony that Hinchcliffe found it too distressing, so removed it. And unfortunately, we don't have that footage because it was removed before transmission. It would have been lovely to see some more fantastic acting, and especially in his valedictory moments for Mark Jones, which had also happened with Noah in the Ark in Space. But that was less to do with performance, and I think Mark Jones's performance is in a different league from Kenton Moore's as Noah in the Ark in Space. We'll talk about that, I'm sure, when we get to the Ark in Space. But there's the scene where Noah pleads with Vira to kill him, which you won't know and love because that's cut, and it's a slightly awkward bit that where Noah's behind the door pointing a gun at them, and then suddenly the door's shut and the gun's on the floor, and Vira says Noah and I were pair bonded, which is still lovely, but it's obviously compromised by the cut in the dialogue where the scene was that Noah begged for his wife to kill him, to end his life before they got married as opposed to after. Hey lads, that was some male bants from me there. I hope you enjoyed it. So I think Chris has chosen a perfect thing and a very good thing to talk about. The body horror, which this period of Doctor Who does so well. Possession, which I know that Hinchcliffe was big on as well. I mean, this is less so than the possession that occurs to Chase later on, but it's still the human mind being sort of clouded and absorbed by alien infection. It's good stuff in it. It's a really, really good Doctor Who story. I love its muscularity. I love its darkness. I love its dripping atmosphere. There's not a bad performance in it. I think all of the acting is superb. John Dixon's lighting as well is excellent. That crackle of the fireplace, those dark little corners, the shadows across the face, the still and poise of Tony Beckley with his leather gloves. I could have worn leaves, but I'm not going to hurt the plants. Whatever. Gorgeous. This is a Doctor Who story I could watch over and over again. And apart from that blooming wobbly bit at the end. And because this has lots of links with Terror of the Zygons. So it's Robert Banks Stewart, Douglas Camfield, double act, with scored by Geoffrey Bergen, but also the 2 Zygon actors, Keith Ashley and Ronald Goff, are also the 2 guys inside the Krynoid duvet. So there's another connection as well. Keith Ashley in particular was a perennial extra. You see him in quite a few. He's the android that tries to strangle Sarah in the Android Invasion. You see him in Doctor in the Silurians. He's got sort of black, quite high black hair. I remember, I'm sure Jeffrey Palmer said that. Oh, he's a lovely boy, Keith Ashley, but never saw interviewed, and is no longer with us. One of those thesps with many a story to tell, particularly, I'm sure, from being under the Krynoid blanket, which, if only I had to put a kink in it as they stumbled towards the Doctor and Sarah, to given that another take. Anyway, a minor kink, but a kink nonetheless, in an almost perfect instalment of Doctor Who. And I know there's loads of dramatic stuff to come in the next episode as well. So I'll very much look forward to that. Thank you very much for joining me. It's nice to be back in the land of the living and to be broadcasting again, even though I have this slight lingering infection. So I'm just going to go and have a tray of raw meat. I'm going to go and properly nurture myself. It's a joy talking to you. I hope you're all doing okay. Yes, I'm actually going to go out into the world tomorrow, having been all locked up. I'm safe. I'm not contagious, and I've got to go to the doctors anyway. So the doctor said to come out. So I'm going to get some fresh air. So I'll try not to eat any ministers of state. Well, thank you very much for listening, and happy times and places to you and yours. Well, thank you ever so much for listening to Happy Times and Places, which is presented by me, Toby Hadoke, and my special guest, Chris Chapman, who can be found on Twitter at ChrisChapman81. I would like to thank my patrons. In fact, I'd like to say Scooby, Get, Chris Williams, Jace Mayo, Tim Arding, David, Nigel Bromley, Jenny at Bluebox99, Paul Cook, Richard Chalk, Peter Crocker, Rob Dawson, John Deere, Chris Dunford Kelp, Paul Dunn, Jason Gorman, Siobhan Galichon, Chris Hyam, Ian Key, Joe Llewellyn, Ian K. McLachlan, Gavin McLean, Rick Moran, Nathan Martin, Graham Knott, Adam Parker, Barry Platt, Risto Mitty Saurillo, Frank Shales and David Trainier, and everybody else, of course. Thanks to you all. The music for these podcasts is by Dave Gates, the artwork by Dylan Patterson. Those patrons you heard mentioned, and there are others. If you would like to join the list, you can, but those patrons help to keep these podcasts ad-free. You don't want me to break off halfway through and go, here's an interesting fact about that actor. Actually, are you fed up of shaving and doing your own cooking? Well, I've got a shaver that I definitely use, and a car that I've just bought, and a food company, which is the only food company I definitely use. And here is me unconvincingly pretending that I'm saying something off the cuff about them, where I'm actually having to say what the company has told me to say in order for 30 pieces of silver to line my coffers to make this podcasting financially viable. I'm not doing any of that. What I'm doing instead is begging from you, because that's far more honourable and less embarrassing, isn't it? I got a Patreon page, patreon.com/Toby Hadoke. You get your name mentioned like that, and you get bonus material, early releases, special access, various other bits and bobs, and it's just nice there. For £3 a month, that's the lowest tier. There are higher tiers. If you're on a higher tier, you get your name mentioned a bit more often, and there are a couple of other things as well, but I don't really like to withhold stuff, so most stuff is available from the lowest tier, which is about 36 quid a year for 3 releases every week. And actually, it's cheaper than 36 quid a year if you sign up for a year, because you get 10% off. Whatever tier you're on, if you sign up for a year, you get 10% off. So that's at Toby Hadoke. It would be great if you could sign up and support these. That just really helps in these tough times. But I know these times are tough. A monthly commitment may seem like a lot. Well, there's Ko-fi.com/Toby Hadoke, where you can just sort of like I'm busking in the underground, but again, standing there going, the key facts about the Dalek operator actor Gerald Taylor were that there's tuppence as I strum it on my guitar. So it's like a sort of passing tip you can throw my way, dependent on how flush you're feeling or how hungry I sound. So that's the Ko-fi model of funding podcasts, which is the way these things are done these days. If you don't want to do the monthly thing, but it may be that you can't do either. And that is fine, because you're listening to this. And if you're listening to this, I am grateful. It's better than howling at the moon. And I'm grateful to every single listener that I have. And if that is you, well, presumably, yeah, because people who aren't listening won't be hearing this. I'm very, very grateful to you. If you could spread the word. Word of mouth is good, but also word of cyberspace is even better. Give these 5 stars on iTunes or wherever you get your podcasts and a few lines of reviews. That helps to separate these from the crowd. And I'd be really grateful. I'm also a comedian. I'm on twitch.tv/Excess Malarkey. I run a comedy club called Excess Malarkey that runs every Tuesday night in Manchester, but also runs monthly online at twitch.tv/Excess Malarkey. There's also an archive up there of past performances, because during the pandemic, where we would have been live in the flesh on a Tuesday night, we went online and we got comics from all around the world, and there's all sorts of people there, from Eddie Pepitone from the US to Laura Fraser from Australia to some homegrown UK talents like James Acaster and Mark Watson and Zoe Lyons and Hal Cruttenden and Marcus Brigstock. Really good stuff. Twitch.tv/Excess Malarkey. Hey, post-credit fans, there's not going to be an awful lot, because it's, as I record this, 3 o'clock in the morning. I've just recorded my inserts for BBC Radio 4 Extra, which I hadn't done because, and here's my fantastic excuse, I totally forgot. But it's also because I have had probably a bucket full of blood taken from my arm, and I thought I'd recovered pretty well from the bout of COVID that has afflicted me. But actually, I think I may have roused myself a little bit too soon, because, well, I'm knackered because it's 3 o'clock in the morning, but also that's because I slept earlier because I was so knackered. So, sorry, after credits speak fans. This is what I actually sound all right, don't I? I feel rotten. Anyway, the show has gone on, and the host has gone on and on and on and on, but that's kind of what I do. Anyway, I hope you're well. If you're a non-patron, by the time you hear this, I'll either be well or dead, but I'm assuming I'm going to be okay. And if you're a patron listening to this, I mean, it should be out by now. 3 o'clock in the morning, I should have released it at midnight. So I apologise for being late, but as in late, as in not on time, as opposed to late, as in dead. Because, again, I'm currently accentuating the positive, and not being dead to me seems quite a positive one. So let's try and see if we can continue with that. I hope you're very well, and I'll keep churning these out. But right, yes, shut up, Toby. You've done it. You've said right, good, all right, bye. Creaky chair. Can you hear the creaky chair? I think you can. Ooh, perhaps I should set a target to earn enough money to buy a new chair. That's a terrible thing. That's a 48-year-old's thing, isn't it? What would you do if you had a bit of money? I'd buy a chair. What happened to a spaceship and poppers and disco passes? That's what I would have done in my 20s. Now a chair, and perhaps a cushion. But a Redbubble one with an International Electromatics logo on it, just to show what a cool guy I am. I've talked more than I said I was going to talk. Bye! Creaky chair. Stop creaking.